Welcome back to College Football Addiction. Going to talk a little bit about a coaching change. Tom Allen leaving Penn State, heading to Clemson, as it would seem. We have Tom Hannifan on State of State podcast and Believe in Big Ten. Tom, how's it going, bud?
Doing just fine. The cycle after the college football semifinal has been extremely busy, and to see Tom Allen depart, I was a little surprised at first as a Penn State fan and someone who covers the team. Was maybe expecting him to be in it for a little while longer, but this is still a blue blood program that he's going to that has a lot of reach and was just in the college football playoff. So it seems like an interesting move, and there's a lot to take away from it for both sides.
Yeah, we'll talk about the Penn State side in a second, but for maybe any Clemson fans that are watching, like on the field, and I want to talk recruiting too here in a minute as well, but on the field, Clemson's defense was pretty terrible. One of the, honestly, one of the worst in the college football playoff, and they obviously snuck in. But they struggled, and it felt like Dabo needed to make a pretty big hire, a pretty big splash hire there. They had hired internally a couple of times, and guys with not having a ton of experience had kind of gone that route, and it didn't work. And so Dabo, I think, needed to make a splash, and certainly did. I think a lot of people were kind of like jaw dropped when this news broke or started to formulate. But on the field, what would Clemson fans, or what should they expect out of a Tom Allen coach defense?
Discipline and consistency. The one thing that I saw out of Tom Allen this year, as opposed to the Manny Diaz era at Penn State, which we got 2 seasons with Diaz as the defensive coordinator, you went from a much riskier style of defense, and Penn State had the personnel under Diaz to get away with it. You're going to see more sacks. You're going to see more turnovers in that respect. This year's defense did not pick up the numbers in that respect, but they did not have a drop off in terms of points per game and stinginess overall. Like, this was still an outstanding group. Now, part of that is the personnel Tom Allen was fortunate to inherit, but I think Tom Allen is just a great defensive coordinator hire at this point in his career, having been a head coach in Indiana, having been a defensive coordinator, and just having been around the block for so long. I just think he makes sense at Clemson. One, to the point that you said they could use some help defensively. I'd be curious if a call was made to Brent Venables, which would make a ton of sense if you're Dabo Swinney. And then you're looking around and thinking, okay, who's somebody I can potentially bring into my program? There's a lot of people that look at it as potentially a lateral move, and that it's all right, it's Big Ten to ACC. And as I just mentioned, we're coming off of a near dynastic run for this Clemson Tigers football program, national championship. So it doesn't seem like too far off. It is lateral, and it doesn't happen all that often. Tom Allen has a familial connection to the Carolinas, which is important. And also, Dabo Swinney has proved that he's willing to throw money at his coordinators to keep them around, and that he operates more as a CEO. So to bring in a Tom Allen to run your defense makes a lot of sense. I think Tom Allen is going to add some much needed grit to this defense for Clemson. And if he can potentially help out on the recruiting front and attracting more talent than they've had recently, they obviously for years were able to get top flight talent, first round draft pick after first round draft pick. I think Tom Allen is going to stabilize things and move Clemson in the right direction defensively.
Yeah, it does seem to be almost a resurgence in Dabo's perspective, just like both looking at it from outsiders. He's using the portal more. He is seemingly upgrading coaches. He did that with an offensive coach a couple of years ago, now on the defensive side of things too. And it seems almost like that, all right, we tried it, but we're going to go and play big boy football like everybody else is. Like, we tried to do it. We tried to make what worked in 2016 and 2018 happen and be the formula. And Dabo's even like, all right, I'm not going to go down being stubborn, right? Like, if I don't do this, I am going to go down swinging, and the bat's not going to be on my shoulder, to use all the cliches. But you mentioned recruiting. I know he wasn't there for a super long time, but just thoughts on, I know you talked about some of the relationships maybe there. He's got good relationships. We were just talking off air here in Tampa, where he was and grew up and got his start. And then obviously he's been up in the Midwest too. And so kind of brings some different geographical maybe advantages to Clemson too. But just from a personality, from a drive, just on the recruiting front, thoughts around that?
I think he brings a national reach, which is great. He's just been around for so long. He's made so many different stops in his career. I think Tom Allen is going to help Clemson in that respect. And to your point about Dabo Sweeney wanting to use the portal more, and like, let's not kid ourselves. There's money to be spent if you're part of the collective or part of those doling out cash within the NIL system for Clemson football. So I think it makes a lot of sense for them to be a little bit more aggressive there. And you get a guy who literally was just in the semifinal of the college football playoff and was able to work with guys the likes of Abdul Carter, who's likely to be a top 5, top 10, top 15 pick in this year's NFL draft. I think there's some notoriety that goes with him that maybe a couple of years ago, because he was at Indiana and it was, some success, and then obviously things fell off, that maybe he wouldn't have had that allure that he has about him right now. So I wouldn't necessarily say that at Penn State he, quote, rehabilitated his image, but he certainly boosted it to the point that he's on the national stage as one of the best defensive coordinators available. And for Clemson to grab that, it corrects things. As I mentioned, the Venables era was uncommon. It was extremely unique, and Clemson was this model of consistency because defensively they knew they had everything covered on the defensive side of the ball. And Venables was a big reason why. So not sure if Tom Allen is there for a substantial amount of time. I was surprised to see him bounce from Penn State as quickly as he did. Was hoping to at least have him for 2 seasons, something like that. But I think Tom Allen is really going to help Clemson and maybe get some of those recruits in the door that are really interested in being developed. I'll use the words of James Franklin, is that he wants Penn State to be not transactional, but transformative. I believe Dabo Sweeney believes in the same values, and Tom Allen can be a big reason why Clemson gets back to being Clemson again.
Yeah, it's an interesting kind of case study too, because we've seen some head coaches jump down to like the coordinator ranks. I mean, it's happened at Florida State with Malzahn. Obviously, you think about Ohio State's offensive coordinator right now, and Chip Kelly. Like, if he wants to, and we've seen the success that Venables had, and then I even think back again to Florida State with, Mickey Andrews and those guys just sticking around forever and just like, hey, I'm just going to coach with Bobby, right? Like, and that's what I'm going to do. And we went away from that for so long, right? Alabama was just this machine that turned out, offensive and defensive coordinators all over the country, and they became head coaches. Will we maybe get back to, could Tom Allen kind of be part of that newer mold that's like, you know what? I can make $2 million a year plus coaching at Clemson and just be Dabo's the CEO, but I'll just be the CEO. This is my defense, and this will be my defense for the next 5+ years. Now, obviously, no telling, right? He could take another job next year, but it'll be interesting to see if he does stick around. And again, it's a case study into what's going to happen with college football here in the next half a decade.
It's the real challenge for coaches now at this point. And listen, no one's crying for somebody making $2 million a year, potentially, whatever his deal is. But it's that issue, you saw over the last year, the exodus of people like Nick Saban, guys going to the National Football League. And then, the odd one of Bill Belichick going from the NFL to college football. We'll see if that one sticks. But there's I think this renaissance happening amongst coaches, is that it's how much of this stuff in terms of NIL, collectives, transfer portal, do you want to deal with? Well, Dabo Sweeney has proven that he can be a great CEO of a football team. But what he has always had is good coordinators and great personnel. So they have to make sure they continue to do their part in terms of recruiting. But for these former head coaches who have turned into coordinators, it's maybe just a little less on their plate. Does Chip Kelly really want to go door to door at this point in his career and shaking hands and kissing babies, something like that? Probably not. That's probably why he's comfortable right now at Ohio State. And he's working with Ryan Day, who he's got a long-term connection with. I think this is maybe something you're going to see more of, but it depends on the tenure. Look at the guys that we're talking about in terms of Tom Allen, Chip Kelly, been around the block for quite some time. I don't know if you'll see that with younger coordinators. They're probably always going to want to take that shot at being head coach. But once you've gotten a taste of this grind of being a CEO of a major blue blood program and trying to deal with roster retention, turnover when the transfer portal opens, like, it's got to be a nightmare. So there's some simplification with just coach ball, just be a coordinator. There's nothing wrong with it by any means. I think the outsider looks at it as if it's a step down to be head coach to coordinator. At the end of the day, are these guys happy? Are they being effective? Are they transforming young people's lives? I think that's really what they want to get at. And yeah, it doesn't hurt to make 7 figures.
Yeah. But you're right. The quality of life aspect of it. Do we kind of see coaching salaries kind of, decrease some too, to where guys aren't making 10, $12 million. They're making closer to 7 or 8, and they do have bigger staffs that take some of the pressure off them. I think it's the where this sport is going. I mean, nobody really knows with everything that you mentioned, NIL and the portal and everything else. But I do think the coaching aspect of it is somewhat changing too, and maybe that's for the better. Big picture. On the Penn State side of this, kind of came as a little bit of a surprise. How big of a loss is this for Penn State?
I think it's big, but I don't think it's something Penn State can't overcome. And that this is the third defensive coordinator Penn State has had in 4 seasons. You go from Brent Pry to 2 years of Manny Diaz and now a season with Tom Allen, and you're left looking around to see who's available. So it's a lot of questions of, do you promote from within? Do you look outside? Some names that have been thrown out there from outside the program who at least have connections to Penn State football would be Elijah Robinson at Texas A&M, Danton Lynn at USC. Now, I say those names simply because they played for Penn State. There was interest in both those guys in last year's cycle, but with Tom Allen becoming available, that was a great option, obviously, for James Franklin to go after. So whether or not those guys even want to leave their programs, I have no idea. They might be set, but it's at least something for Penn State to think about and kick the tires. And then it's the question of, does Penn State promote from within? Associate head coach Terry Smith has engineered the revolution of Penn State's defensive backs for years, and it has been an instrumental part in the way that Penn State recruits on the defensive side of the ball, why Penn State has had so much success with personnel on that side. Anthony Poindexter, who works with safeties, is somebody who was up for the head coaching job at Virginia not too long ago, played for the Cavaliers at one point. So, I mean, hell, if you're in that conversation, James Franklin likes to say everybody's the head coach of their position or their side of the ball. Poindexter could be somebody they just naturally elevate. There's a lot of Penn State fans who have talked about Dan Connors within the program, but he's an analyst. So to jump from analyst to defensive coordinator would be an enormous leap and extremely uncommon. And James Franklin isn't one to do that just based on a guy's notoriety. He very much believes in the conventional coaching ladder. So I wouldn't expect to see that. So it comes at a time where you do expect turnover immediately after your team is finished with the totality of the season, but it's a bit of a surprise. So this is not something James Franklin is unaccustomed to, however, and he has had historically pretty good success with picking out defensive coordinators his time at Penn State. So I have every confidence they're going to find the right person, just a matter of who and when.
Tom, where can people follow you? Where can they find more of your work? I know you'll cover this and probably even much more in depth than we have here, but where will you continue to cover this and where can people follow you?
Yeah, check out State of State, a Penn State football show with myself and former Penn State and NFL defensive back Justin King, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're interested in all things Big Ten football, check out Believe in Big Ten with myself and former Indiana wide receiver and Big Ten Network and NFL Network correspondent Rhett Lewis. It's also wherever you get your podcasts, and you can check me out on social media at Tom Hannifan, TomHannifan.
Thanks, buddy.
Thank you.
I appreciate Tom Hannifan, State of State, a Penn State show, and Believe in Big Ten, for joining me to chat a little bit about Penn State, a little bit about what they're going to do going forward. If you enjoyed this content, if you liked it, if you hated it, if it made you feel any kind of way, do us a favor and hit that subscribe button. We certainly do appreciate all of the support as we continue to grow here on College Football Addiction. We will talk to you guys soon.